And I'm going to read a text which, although it's 10 years old, I have never read in my life before. So we're in for an up and down ride, you might say. I'm just, as I say, talking you into this by saying, to get, as it were, certain vocal retunements adjusted, by saying that this is a collection, a sequence called Triodes, published in 1999. And I'll just explain, because I've been in a seminar most of the afternoon and not refusing to explain has been my forte. So now, in order to rebalance the equation, I should do a tiny little bit of explaining. Triodes is one of those disgraceful manoeuvres which adopts a word and substantially manoeuvres it into unintelligibility. They are a sequence of approximate ode-like constructions. They are arranged in 3 books, so there are triodes to come. Each of the books is introduced by a mathematical equation, which is the formula for the operation of the triode valve, which is an old-style thermionic valve before the era of the computer alternative, and the usual thermionic valve is a diode, which consists of an anode and a cathode, and these are a sort of a specialized subversion of the normal thermionic valve, which is a triode. There's an anode and a cathode and an intercepting grid, which comprises the 3 parts of this complex construction. I regard this, therefore, as a trielectric performance, not electric or dielectric, but trielectric, and that's why they're triodes. So now, without more ado, since we've talked ourselves out of one frame of reference and perhaps into another, I will attempt to read this to you. Maybe I'll just lean forward a bit. It's okay, fine. I'll lean into this, be more comfortable, get down to it. All right. Pandora made enlightened states for her sister, prized liquids in unwounded novice argumentum. She was raw that day in promoting first flight over the Tentaground alto. Licking her finger, she poured new water into a crevice in the ground for them both so, decurrent, cheek facing cheek, catering soft lair now. Irene, plant group, mother, you infix shop limits. Ah, Pandora, your leading cravat will rise to the sun with its charade attuned in rampage peccant for geminate routing, the split double to mark the horizon with the tatter of an homonymous city. I will now read it out. All right. Days away for replication, away days in and out breaking the city limit at dawn flight, Friday PM workmanship issued from a slot, the early sun over tilting, so smart, like a fresh lease locked still descended in offensive charm, later down Pandora, late to fumble, her destiny was it somewhere at the back, why not, well put, exactly where some bright cloud for shift for hot fuse. Nor door nor port watching, yet outwards, easy to take, poor fracas, incident even-handed parlando. Parch a very light ironical slant beam pervaded with ticket coded, you get a spare on target too. Irene will do it up later, blister none left, or voicemail derogation, leaf by leaf. So dropped for a sister's patter return, as from a maiden chamber shading her brow. Pray for us, lady, our yeast plugging each nostril, spoken Pandora's file intact. Secondary, polished, upreach, facts by return, she will attenuate, nice and easy, their shadow caloric tape, outlet for day by day jurisdiction. Leaf by leaf, speeding its creamy yeast, chatter, bunk, matter, tax, perfects, arrow and spoon with either sorbitol arriver text. Visions of ingots dance before their eyes, tunnel ahead, part margin, sacrificial anode trading the day. Listen, Pandora, nothing, no respite on Friday, gunning her shoe in memorial for spent-out ekphrastic clamation. Fit, Irene, too sweet, the virtualities with double faction. The text omits, the margin includes, you dope. Provoked to neither shout nor sigh, hot target, treat us by measured tread, sweet split double in the fold, to go down almost there. Suffusive dram opening on automatic, spruce on Velcro, your family trip to a far-fetched accumulation. Hail, goiter retrieval, vestal detour, fast food morsel resale, in battered row for safe cervix. Ah, most sacred and divine fish on this scale, snatched to heart by anodyne, loaded by loving sarcasmus. Ah, pent-up slag, live forever by charm shot, by lurid sodium portraiture in trip, on Gaza Strip in codon, firstly by same-day express gravitation. Pandora, come down off that ladder at once, you idiot! Rates on hold, tangible, swept and squeezing, your narrow sunflower stupefaction. Unlocking her oven with a zip drive per second billing, she stakes with Irene the digits over flush counter drizzle speck on speck in talk time for virgin oil-filed second branch. For lunch, thus bright in tears, when I am gone, remember, frozen Wye River, no one keeps striking shall plume her charms, gash-inflected exiles boast, for breakfast onwards, in cash advance, dazzled, Pandora, accomplice of her fiery arm, alight with mock fury, you tease, you work out the average value of each night, set against free talk on notice, to sever, flash out at oddity. In the skylight, tufting of plausible omen, of holy mackerel she gawped, attached for great suffering snakes, sugar parrots, all raucous and red-eyed, attending each a flicker of time-out sent down for it to the shortfall of a party obit. Sit out on the balcony, festal blinking at sun surges for a half-hour discount in their phantom options. Exchanges all brisk and fresh, tell me your mind by invitation, get off, wind up sister for supper, better pickings, ex-party pensions for a modicum. Read the letter, Irene, slit and gut its canopy in blue-green tricots by parcel force, such bands marching to early glory stunts. Ah, Pandora, read the running of these rails afar, after the ovens of the land had been fixed up with the bellows of stupid amazement, after the earth had been separated from the sky, making the reeds jump and sway in their vermeil-enriched cages, the gazers fixed on the Lebanese percentage, the Armenian star shots from the bridge of their ever-sweet connection. To each tablet a flourish in radius, a memorial to oversee endless divided accusations of relation, bearing gifts all worthless, pick one. Stick, you say, the son who had a mother, she brought him bread. The brother who had a sister, she brought him bread. All in abundance of necessity, setting the strings tighter to promote the raft of confusion, sailing each night. Salome, salami, fabricant! Ah, beauty, I wish to praise thee, but Irene, the banner of trampled tulips, is stupid to lump its rivers and clean out clear this sheen engorged, to cry like a diabetic locked in a chocolate factory, to get towed by brackets ahead into an exclusion zone of eagerness. That kid don't steal because you credit the tail, he makes credit to get your goat, you giddy lady whose giddy aunt, oozing with sex appeal, and all for free insinuation. You know that. Dual steerage just hits the curve every time, says she in terror scuff story in the territory, says she to thee. What makes the rays cry out and rise, to fall with a soft shrinking tremor, base rate on a needle, gauging parity for those not too far from Rapunzel's spindle. Yet more doves make their hazy complaint in season, and save and flutter on the wing, and gasp a trig, grasp a twig to catch on for sibilant inclusion, soothing the very air with unavailing news of themselves, of nothing else. As up ahead from the balcony outlook, the same puffy clouds make their dumb allegations of spot the difference, judge the moment, lest each to each in sweet sport judgment is done. Okay, that was book one. Now we'll do book two. All across the northern perimeter, all tentered across with fresh mackerel skies, the hours of isoglucose symmetry rush right-handed across the face and melt down. And yes, come clean, Irene, those dippy birds so scuttled along the pediment are for sure making their mark. Stone and sky in the free mid-morning light, pale hands folded on little wrists, we skip the breeze with loops of plenitude. The pediment joins charged clouds over to its lightning earth, cathode protection of the whole body, the Attic swap, salt for molasses. Get ready to shed a tear here for soft, rocking, Cretaceous aspersion. For miles of the Nile, at an angle turbid with fish, Pandora yawned, I hate these mummy shots. Abusir prisoners lashed up, gods not in the sky, however it looks, but plodding on strings on the earth. As for the tree, he tore it out at the roots and snapped off its branches. The sons of the city who had come with him lopped off its branches, lashed them together to make play for full day, peak time balance of equity, scooping up British sugar to sweet that pill. Sugar babes across the lengthening day will lick and suck in morning tongues, for sweet up princes think they're so smart. Irene, did you see what that driver just did? Pandora wrote down her next sight of the ossuary in cryptic notation, scribbled on her pad. She knew the dockets flailed in a price sinkage. Irene took notes at work, but they dropped right out of view, these low-level war figures, in muzzy profile for a watching brief from day to day. Or failing to meet the return of gifts calls down a default curse. More often it involves a public gift of a large amount of sugar, like tying a cloth to a tree to have the word, penthouse imitation, slaps viewing rights in the archive, mining for juice, even when blown away in the price war escalation. One hand washes the other, whiter than white. Our roasted mother, says Irene, she dispenses patchy temper at the pair rule, slim, kibbled and engrailed, big time under heaven. The pediment writes the balcony with the script of a Gap gene code, not found back of the throat, gasping and retching. She admits ingredient sunk costs, embellished value, vaunted under Swift's cloudy skirts, masking the extreme nudity of bone. Along these patrial sector quotas, the hot fit calls in a paramedic crew with dewy fingers alerted, unwrapping the wafer-sliced tongue that Pandora never mentions. Just get on with it, baby face, easy sizing your strap in the street below. Sterilized by recall, fragile infants, current in front anodized, that arm directing 30 pounds of Barrett Light 50, fold away tripod swiveled like a feather, quilling up its curated pods for free by single shot sperm count. The plaything took out by lightest touches, as upon a forearm quick with tendons coaxed along the flow axis of blood pulsing across the diode grid. The Durchgriff crack force marked up the calendar with red letters, ripping its entry to shreds. She would remember his arm resting like that, turning just slightly to freeze the gamut of warning lights, quoting coldly on the mount and by heart. Meet and make a match on the pedigree as follows. Imagine any triode as being replaced by an equivalent diode, mapping out the anode potential on tender factored to Mozambique sugar rehab. Total funded in package per pro, 1. the Kuwait Fund for Arab Economic Development. 2. The OPEC Fund for International Development. 3. The Arab Bank for Economic Development in Africa. 4. Nedcor Bank Limited. 5. Aquaria de Sinabain SARL. The anode potential produces the same effect in the region near the cathode as the combined effects of anode and grid in the corresponding triode. Oil to sugar. The map bends out, open and shut. Doves fall out of the sky. You can get the knack of it, Pandora said. By measure or proxy, get a move on in sedimented mirror image sets. He wronged, he is wronged, he advised, he deliberated, they seized, they were quarrelling, grasping one another, they raged, they went on a rampage. Phew, these boys act primitive, right at the verbal root, with a cap, wind spun and flying outwards, gibber, gibber, floored by exposed pavement. Irene, bank on the grammar, flowing in Piedmont heat across the pediment. Among the Romans, the pediment was so much respected, it was confined entirely to buildings sacred to their immortal gods. Just bring one up on the balcony, she said. Radiant, divine lunchtime. Lessons at the Dream Palace. Lesson on their market costs, bounded away from zero, tarnished like a folk theorem. Irene alone contemplates the ice cream sellers, licking her lips. Be mine the hut, blood racing, Aeolian delivery lamentable in fear, skin tight. Das war ich mal. Swaying a little to slice up a sandwich packed suspected, armed than the man on a chutney bun, her kitchen devil will flourish by the hour on the roasting grid, tomorrow and tomorrow in the micro. Even so, the smoke of sacrifice on the table, pre-cooked yesterday, never mind, best not yet, good to abduct from ruin and decay, all back to the homeland. Magpie target, going in through the torus of penetration, chilled crosshairs exfoliating the flesh with joy incarnate, loop before target, drug hit on computed surge count. Flesh burns in the vineyard, induced currency preening, grand mal, pretty ire, one more song, Irene, low-level engagement, finger on the token mistake. Spark risen up against the shutters, spelling from the vat, hold steady, not casual, not laid out, ever disposed for a dip over count lines, boosting the birth rate, fits of corrupted seed assault. Locks broken under battery, aim each shot, tab needle, foolish boys, drifting into sight. Either way, some say, well, they all do. Butane refill, trust me whenever, leaving room to declare the hood of a should. The brow of a famous tea towel sounds like Valentino. Remake, Sharm el Sheikh will run and run. How could you give an inch wrapped in tinsel? Explode the text up on stage, wrapped in a detonator. Letters of guarantee, straight away, ink hardly dry. In this rope of sand, overcome with fumes, look away and say what you must, Pandora, what's for dinner? Herself to blame, and suit yourself with a loose button. Okay, old kingdom, fresh terms, saline drip, so don't move until then, and then nod your pretty head. Book 3. By laconic fits and starts, the confection tips over to paint blending, lateralized for sieve gulps in plain view. Patter furnish bids for them as Y sinks to murmur tones as youthful and carefree, endearment options all out there in grand slam across the diluvium. Tell me your story in my version along the radiant Grande Allée, scrub and bow down in lasting demurest visits. Dippy Pandora, hit up now forever, celestial prudes, so we make the first moving advantage over the ledge, propitiate parapets, us so far tilting in a bowl, our bowl, as the striate beds expulsed under the balcony, their inverse rational gleams not yet glazed over with caramel, make what yet you will. I saw the groves of acanthus rise up and bite the lips of clear morning light, in sighs from fresh flourish bantering catches their tentered falls. You did? What next to Prynne chicken set to thaw out on a bed perused by damaged route attractions, le Roi Capon. I saw mounting hosts of the Crown Burger King, dipping their lancets across crane gantries, sugar puffs in the orphanage, see without limit the clandestine fury of attack, hot bedding in selection, the patient wards by court action, in breeding, barbaric and divulged. All this passed at review grading astigmatic for the libido, one thing lending its list to another, as all things will. It is the clearance zone in glimpse through to a graben sump that you descry, Irene. Deserts of close deserving hydroptic and factorized. Go no further on chicken wing, count up to base 10 and sink the maze like dross on a snowbank by size of what tells its tale. Slicker bits we get, better options in surgery on a platform, slanting our targets in market surge on a new drug release, added more sugar at the slush bar to make a plea for sweeter reasons, added virtue, new slave endurance, make the sum. Evenly both stairways scan and flex the tropic invert for now, holding by decommission their parlour antic, rigid in settled silt. The new drug is the target. Non-retail fixture pushes on right ahead, case by case, spread about like leaves over rail track to guide in milk their phantom dusky limbs. Ever to guide this passage shall the aerial sprites fill all their starry lamps with double blaze, twin flecks of biting the hand. Yet still they come, our bloated threat of entry into a slot wedged open by start-up costs. Dear transom, split, get on deck with this. The array lies down in flat plan to resist what anyone gets told to say is done. Glib, lazy, mild steel to footing as side play draws up its release. Pandora, how could you ever even think that stuff? Etc. So, thank you. So in the warm air of the outside, where did the eyes of glory start out from their chairs? Who were the heirs to this, amazed by fright and frighted by amaze? At the jetty coin they gave not a toss, or were taxed to share out for scarlet and crimson just below the fingernail, 2 quiet lines. Ah, with dog and bottle Irene done up in quick succession, slick extrusion of the carnal body image, with all organs on sale, tacit choice of ethnic origin. You do have to feel right in yourself, or if, or may, or why not, should you, by sham, repro, shame fittings, as all along the parapet, the muses gazed and outstared rejection. Back in the kitchen, where the lies simmer in giant vats, she picks over the runner beans for buttering up now in oral testimony, not overdone, or they'll be mushy and tasteless. In vaulted witness I had to tell her, so bruised in use value by assailants masked and muted down. Later at the cutaneous sack of Rome, with nipples bleeding, I saw we both were mutilated as by fierce bites, the words stripping the tongue by instant corrosion of lip service. Pandora guzzled, and I did. We were so famished for blight spores to play humectant breeding, we desired all foreign babble for ourselves, cresting the airstream in bruits, hearts racing for a novel pit stop. Irene, we are the slave market now, not maybe, but crying aloud for master sweets. I can see there the chiefs of staff in slick plastic barrels sit all around a table of tentaground, not our assets pegged out or ready to slide, but body by body dismembered. We grope for them, Irene. We make them frantic. The children falter in the queue for food. We saw it on TV. I wanted to cry with a terrible voice. How scabby, you said. They make them roll their eyes, roll a filmic bandage, roll hoops down the funfair ramp, willing the chain of causes, sequenced in credit checks, as malt breakers consumed to a crisp. Flaky redeployment state. We could use that, Irene, before it splits out the kitchen. Right on the nerve, ah, sweet sugar light. We were accused by harsh desire for goodness and protein bonds, for sex with our native tongue. We applied, we tapped on round after round, as, cocking our elbows, we saw them fall, hot blowing wind to mock weapon audit franchise, our amiable recoil scores for angry sore points. At the loading ramps of free misery, we both did cry out with ecstatic joy, and not by mistake, in gorgeous trip on the wheel of punishment. We saw, arch after arch, pushing up in the colonnade, the cut-open pediments of classical exits, a canter of promises not quite broken, because made that way, mazy let-outs of style in design and drug options. We did cry out, brandish our paltry money, did flaunt every asset we had. The scores read like this. Word ranking under the Sentences Act gives a choice of tempers, arbiter's freedom to set out where the deepest shadows shall fall. With blood on their hands is a terror attack on the Jewish state. Antrim West Bank, lemon curds. Don't waver. In order to renounce the use of arms, it is necessary to have weapons to hand and in hand, preferably bloodied beyond a doubt. The men who would use them must be free credibly to do so. If not to do just that is to be a free choice. The crime of the rational script permits a script of crime in time to calibrate the forces of pent-up sentence, word by word. So it was that Pandora and Irene, the chicks, were donated entirely and wavered in themselves and stitched up. This is called The View from the Balcony. You can download a copy for your own personal use whenever you want. Across the back of Jean Cousin's portrait of Pandora, posing as Eve, you can see under the breast arch of decayed masonry a distant city crowned by a giant classical nipple, real cute, but not a patch on a navel to die for. Of course I knew the children were starving. Probably that Pandora doesn't miss a trick. Irene, are you still out there? You'll get burned, my sweet. Never the prettiest sight. Time to go in and down all sore points and feed unmixed their flame. Thank you.
Now that Eirik has explained the year I was born, I figure that we can all figure out when that would have been, what I would have been thinking about those things. I want to thank, first of all, Keston, whose idea this was to get together, and want to thank both of the readers for these splendid and spectacular delusional acts we've just been subjected to. I'm just going to be reading a series of rhyming love poems. Generally from a manuscript called Hallucination, which Flood has agreed to publish. They still have, haven't they? Sometime in the foreseeable, well, the unforeseeable future, because the future can't be foreseen, as we've learned. And then some things from a book called Watchword. Hello. For the void, my eyes close, horse, dog, monkey gather at wood's edge to observe each other, make sounds, drink juice, pour down salt. The primitive nature of this scene evokes deep memories of crude states before the imposition of trembling, paleness, and sobbing, as I will show. Hope for happiness. I want to thank the 2nd District Appellate Court, State of Illinois, for the first part of this poem. Hope for happiness. The diffused responsibility of the approval process means it is more than likely that you will make an uninformed choice. Reviewing accounts is work, generally tedious work. And if you're not familiar with the difficult work, thankless work, lingering and vexatious work, aggravating, terrible. So you are tempted to rely on others, even those who have mastered information they can use against you, or who try to fix in you the uncomfortable feeling that your own thoughts are ashamed of you. Or who can demonstrate that a premonition of your death has accrued inside statements like, "I think I'm right." You who cannot bear to see a fly killed, whose ingenuity, openness, and plain expression make you a joy to your heirs, who reap their hopes from your testament, devising hay for a chest, pumpkin seeds for eyes, and clouds for cleft lids. You descend to a floor fabricated from things that have burst. Because it makes no sense to proceed, you remain still, only turning your head toward the east, then to the west, then back again. In either direction, the objects seen, buildings, streetlights, windows, cars, fall away at a constant rate of speed, which seems to increase slightly the instant you shift your eyes. Someone crosses the floor in front of you. There's a rhythm and buoyancy in this passage, as though obliviousness has become insight. On the street, stick figures trudge through the snow and pause under laden awnings. You labor to exclude the entire scene from your existence, or else to suspend its vesting indefinitely. But the power of alienation soaks you in flames. Manifold, this dares not money or property be engaged, nor now be propounded, should one make out well representing the power to you of an automatically acquired carnal imagination. How far are we free, through facilitating expressions, to determine when to be frozen, given an adequate selection of time? Somewhat odd, I makes the opposite mistake, save on behalf of those that had no right before, but now are come to a permanent fixed interest in something other than themselves. Secluded here, smelling of tar, one might be inclined to ask, how is it your legs were bent back? By simplification, one might reply, the formula requires a gesture like this, correlated with riches, honors, pleasures, lawyers, armies. It does not extend beyond them, though perhaps it does, having become a spider. You and your spies. There is a case to be made for listing things about which we do not care. A point of confusion arises regarding order, where order is nothing save a faint posthumous beat signifying what? Today. Signifying both. Both an intensity armed against slackness and a stylish meandering near boundaries. Not like this. Phases of a vowel are managed consecutively if state law allows. And the older organisms tend to be self-governing, and no amount of recollection can unscrew the basic template for their embittered sentience. Which brings us to hatred, its causes, and how to remove them. Predisposed to calm, we turn imprudently toward anger, then sorrow, then incapacity, or toward those who think in such terms. I can't amend them here and now as I might wish, nor can I say I would do so if I were actually able to. Not out of hesitation or weakness, but because I hope to find a veil to wander in, a veil of views enjoyed as much for their beauty and sweep as for their way of adapting themselves to states we can inhabit simply by bending our knees. And once arrived, I doubt I will ever return. There, morning skies glow, clothes fit well, statutes cooperate. The river distributes itself without reference to those who walk beside it, and the debris it carries is pledged. Pledged but worthless. Treasure hidden since the state would gather up soft tissues like wildflowers at the plow, meditating bell-like they flew, the leaf, the flake, the filament. An analysis. The property of each occupies its own house. Salt clings to the fruit on their tables. It was none other than the sun itself came roaring down at this time. Slanting toward the west, its influence dried up the benign moisture conferred by the east. All three went walking before supper, and there was in consequence devised an orderly allocation of graves. They were to be placed side by side where daylight dims and trees lean low against hearts of stone. Later, their postprandial conference gave rise to conflict. Would those dispositions become timely? Throughout the night, the hesitant one assessed the evidence, the others stared at the trombones. We know what becomes active when we sleep, yet that was missing. At last, the dewless dawn signaled the first attainment. Their molecules spontaneously unwove. For the state they sought could never have succumbed to them so long as they had clung to material mediation. Now the morning air shot through the framework events contrived. They were no longer bound by the concepts that bore them, and they could stretch and swarm into all physical dimensions, or pour themselves into every object of thought. Shining out of the stillness where they once had lurked, the sun became the organ of their efficacy. Poimandrous. Clear away a space for fresh water jumping from the sky. We who nothing can distinguish from no one, be near or be near us now, be recognizable who foreknew this rain so refined. Nightly inundation in adobo, impalpable. Had you been present, some mortal share would have turned away from the greased footpath, arms folded, unentered into this state, to stare with a sleepwalker's ochre eye through the sodden heat behind the wall where nothing originates, nothing terminates. The wall is a vegetable, wailing on high, blue and immobile, a kind of breakfast in its mouth, so luminous the discharge. Go, wipe the blood off. I notice your skin vanishes while my lamp burns all night long. What is the indispensable condition linking these two? Some fibrous base that chokes the spine, or great disheveled dome lit up by artifice? The nerveless old snake, whack it, thou empty sign. Hypothecary transaction. It cannot be stated more clearly that we are not in a position to resolve problems bequeathed to us. Those problems admit of a twofold division, the rational and the intuitive. Either or both will be swallowed up in the state of nothing whatever if we are lucky enough to reach it. To demonstrate this, we run the engine backwards. A rooster and 3 hens are standing on the tracks. Watch as they pass into a wholly indefinite state. Inside the house, the air trembles and repents. You conclude that the entire human being is less than the painting of a snail. Then the front door shuts. Reason reasons its form and those of its collateral components peeling. Nothing will not happen because of this. It is simply an exercise in internal refinement or an adjustment to basis. What then really occurred 10 years ago? Were they negligent or devious? Do the same facts imply both? To answer this, we roll the engine forward without starting it. The words attain and dwell are then read through the wheels as they pass over them, so that at and we intimate the lost cave of intuition far inside the brain. We are now at the place we share with it and it with us. But redemption is not consented to. Mistakes continue to spill over the land as in the front of pure thought. Adventurers reorganize in ever-growing numbers. We wait tirelessly until they come to us. End of poem. Morning sutta, flying limpid bramble drop, verdant neb of 2 tatarai, startled bright, concrete stare. El Poeta. Those of you who work with me know that we have somebody at our company whose first name nobody never knows how to pronounce. It's pronounced Jacobo. It was just the word I needed at the time. El Poeta. The latter possesses only transitory instincts, parts of which are snapped off to form stars. Anabaptist. To the east, the lake floats above the grass. Asservation. Below the surface, the present me is preserved forever, while the former me is cut off. Yehobo. Dipping my hand in, I watch the cold fluid shrink my fingers, which represent 5 lines composed with first stress off, second stress on, and 0.03% overlap. Complete silence, then its opposite. For the moment, teacher says, they are one, like a trumpet. The heavy, the sad, the smooth, the rough, the bitter, the hard, the wicked, the brief, the coarse, the loud, the hidden, the warm, the recumbent, the astringent. Whether transmutation of sweat into air signifies the middle of unrealized thought by lease and release of interest in what we call things, not anxious to be combined by cold estimation, none to sweep up after the craze, the shake, and those prepared to sacrifice through sensitive or imaginative power the flavor, the sweetness, none could describe except the inflamed. George Paul Kung Fu. He's an actual person. I believe the litigation is settled. so I don't think there are any recriminations that can be gathered, except this is archived, right?
Being recorded.
Okay. Then you see it's Alexander Pope used to do, GP Kung Fu. So it's to be sung to the tune of Curtis Mayfield's Kung Fu. The regular daily charter tipped forward to get new orders for those buying feed to stuff through the keyholes. He asked for 10% of it, which are just visible peeking through the flexible mountings horizontally transformed by stone, rocks, and pebbles. Why didn't he follow up? In this space, a dilemma is presented by the temptation to play the instrument into an expectancy or flash those charismatic warning lights drivers ignore, transfixed by the intermittent white function. And George was also there to gather plums. Where was his toothache, Kung Fu? Why are his hands bound with iron rings? At dockside, dog-faced dealers strive to accommodate unexpected demand shown here in component form. But while our whole future vibrates inside a shell, the fallacies from which our opponents derive themselves will be revealed atop a holy hill at 3 o'clock next Thursday, and continuing on through all the countless Thursdays until lifted up on soft breezes, the trance subject starts to bark at acorns as they smack off the roof. See the birds of the air, how they overflow. George leans back at exactly the wrong time and entheos his esophagus. His porcelain soul, subject to annihilation, adheres to uneven surfaces as a faint residual pulse beats out similes and parables. So much mental strain cannot help but manifest itself. We write a tortured letter. We quote a wounded argument. By default, we gain possession of the field. Note the kind of eye given to this sight. We fold our hearts through a pinhole Kung Fu. Do not increase or decrease these medicines I am recommending. September 1972. In connection with spandrel glass, honey sprigs jut like this against any person leasing hope hereafter deposited with assurance that there may be areas exposed to light duress of being unmodified. But crisper, drier throats swap out ordinary words to circumvent this stipulation and absorb all facts directly. Middle list, the furrowed bitter, beware the power of the bitter, recited continuously above, that enters the heart, the acrid air that stirs others odorless at evening, and those that do not yield rise up translucent for bread to be shared and glazed with refinements. Amethyst clicks lightly on the automatic door, and rings nor middle, nor end, nor begins. The will. You'll have to guess which Bob Dylan song I was listening to as I was revising this. On the train. The will, it dreamt that it spoke as it dreamt, and wrote down what it spoke in echoes of situations dreamt about, which its mind wondered at. There's a quality about it, however, that did not involve any dreaming, as far as could be determined, no one being in a position to grasp either the nature of this quality or the experience whereby its existence was inferred. Those echoes it knew were clean. Then swooping in thought incapable of economy began to vary over time, which might also be said of silence, were it not the right affect, babe. For if mind were not itself object, and were not freely described as all things and all things differently seen or felt, noting in particular a bed of stones overlaid by straight lines, babe, then this would not appear as manipulation or surveillance, but a clear fountain of flowing tongues, not memory of non-existence, but an orderly disposition of meanings and events. While still functioning, let us all be ambient zero in what we heap. Our acts are ignorant of their purposes. With closed eyes, we watch the waters overrun the field. Would it have been wrong to have given access to an unauthorized discussion, or what passed for discussion, 16 present, 4 voices heard, and an undetermined number listening, just when incentives should have been sought to ignore it, or lug it around like a dirty price? Who advises the teeth, the hair, and the gums? Who ascribes to the abyss humility? Appetite is resigned to wait it out. Mind is tautological, but dreams sputter all night long. Nothing can be moderated by will, only by circumstance, in which the will is one element. Coming into the home stretch here. Big ship. Whoever comes tonight must express what happens when his substance is endowed with speeds approaching the end state of what thought aspires to. Our technicians can read oatmeal. and parse illustrative examples into huge asphalt snakes intertwining among mines, partially corrected for vindictive indicators. Hence, no reaction can express one thing about all others. Is that spider a threat to your perfection? Its being rightly strives to pluck this window in gray light. The blue form is lowered into its infinite self-sufficiency. Suppose then we are at rest in the thing's brain, perfectly happy there, or else suspended in the brain of a distant object. It clearly follows that what we conclude has spent month after month inside a simpleton. Lord, I hear that which happens to us outside the usual course thinks we can change. Let us pay homage to what is not really a statement. Proof appended here, which is tried to connect motley to colorless. When you spread your whistle against this enormous space, place your finger in the clouds, and drink in the tincture of a clear and effective exhalation respecting the dead, who sailed on a big ship 5 centuries ago last night. When questions arose, such as why inveilings or lustrate subsumption should follow immediately, flip feigning to seduce some other verb that doesn't break down from non-perception. Say, upstanding oracles, of what splendor must this legitimate get-up, uptake, shatter erected to oneself, this stinging mirabile with adjustments enough to quiet them. In a crazy burst of sunlight, the mole will penetrate to what is anonymously watched by a stream. I saw myself the other night, loosely framed, having given up, having discarded, having been freed from my own multiplicity. And I saw the luminous whiteness of the sky contained in my own hands, and fell asleep in this formless place, and could not be evicted. Secrecy officer. As I was telling Jeremy and Keston, there actually is a secrecy officer. I saw it on some board minutes.
I don't know who he is.
We don't know. No, it's a secret. Although his name was disclosed, but unfortunately, it wasn't Yehobo. Although he fit the bill, I think. Secrecy officer. When pressure is applied to agents, servants, entities, or subsidiary entities by means of demands, reckonings, bonds, actions, or inducements, the resulting friction is barely contained. Thus the term release. The need to price these theoretical alternatives offsets the dilation of simple desire. Can one even breathe without escaping this hive? Stillness and remoteness are worth sustaining until they cloy. Change in the usual sense is obliterated. Once synonymous with time, today it signifies parallel auxiliary states, untenably elided by squinting. When nothingness is acquired, failure to meet contractual terms is assured. Transferring this exposure to the parking lot offers relief but complicates oversight. Down in the ghostly streets, fog moistens every footprint. Where the lake had once been, there now stands an obelisk. The pavement begins to sway, somehow giving a greenish tint to nearby objects, which turn silver as they recede. For as the swaying intensifies, everything grows more and more distant, and one's own vantage point slowly but perceptibly deteriorates, until it slumps into the earth. Shadows catch an alien motion, writes the secrecy officer on the lost page in front of him. Last piece looks long, but it goes quick. Called the elixir. It's a very brief proem. Elixir. Pull this rope to relieve symptoms from harsh to mellow, the gross scare all been dreading, and swaps themselves tutelary update deficiency tabs, and I'll be sure to prune my eyelids. From within polymorphous shadows, steel stairs lead up an embankment, and my thought is to climb them, accompanied by Prester John. Our voices fall like pallets from a truck. 2 pigeons pivot in an invisible maze. Then one day I got a call, wandering barefoot into crosshairs, followed by a trickle of brown thread seen from above. Nothing much to discuss there. Lift bar and pull, he said, send forth froth or tint to glimmer of fleshy smoke drifting halfway down the clastic age of limestone, whose resentful magi traverse your sheath. Finding an inmost sore point by derivative force springs upward, notwithstanding the lightning chain bound him precariously to spiritum arcanum sprouting inside our caravan, fallen again to its daily limit. The rugmasters tied up with nylon strings winding down the mountain like trained animals, their dark square feet amending the path while he rides on, fingers crystallize, the red wagon goes boom. Such fatal consciousness our specialty, said the duck, slung over his back. Behold 7 signs for 7 planets, floating like incrustations of tongue-ready gold, or telltale iridium. Then impulse is ushered in, and walls cut open to admit pure figure, stretched out on a scintillant shadow, undimmed, undefined, strumming away in what form the otiose hedge it. Below each day's excess, an impredicable blank, lying awake in fidelity to a distant sight beside a small pond. A flock whips left, leafless tree, not anticipating a drop, reverses it in faint light, tremulous straddles. Truth was, he'd been stricken, blood sport for lease, ground rent owed by consociation of idiosyncrasies, sated with tamarind soup or lack of institutional fortitude. After a 1 week catastrophe, ghosts ribboning through the torpor, less than fastidious. Think not how, but who. Not who, but what was upsprung. Southbound cyclones, indifferent which items to secure. When sun bleeds, air falls below the earth. Solemn companions, otherwise estranged, their temperaments fuse in one ecstatic movement. We put on their yellow vests and wade out into the heat of an intense transfiguration, glancing back without remembering. If you would indulge one more. I wrote this poem April 15th, 2002. However many, that's 7 years ago today. I promised my son I would read it. Although I don't have the large print that I've been printing out so I could read things. Ode at work. Head on shoulder, Pamphilus, fascinated by muttering. Why not remove any doubt, however academic, as to the validity of the transfer, if possible, avoid committing funds. The delay between January 31st and February 5th is offered in sympathy to all earthbound travelers to frame them between true and false. How many things we do that are uncertain, and how many more to come, puzzling, variable, frail, injudicious, unintelligible, wrong. This is the regression to nightmare. Hotter and hotter the door begins to melt, revealing a small causeway over the investments in continuity and tenure. What will eventually prompt a sale? Kinetic indulgence. Having attended law school, they could not be imposed upon, so we decided to vote their shares. I won't do anything in the most shameful way. I remember that very well after hours on the phone. Tell me whether seeing consistent opening and turning the eyes. Welcome to town, reviling words. Your laws shall not reach to oppress us any longer. 1,500,000 reasons to die. Beds, leaves, blankets, looking back from afar. Consult my small plastic head. She's about to explode. Pamphilus, you work in this big office? While I pronounced these words, I could detect a faint smile at the window behind me. Then the floor started to shake. I've never called this a memory, but I could talk of nothing else. Now, after 2 years of patient silence, I am still haunted by it. The writer hereof does require that your inferences be removed from his sight. The junkyard and the sun, the milky haze, the standing water, for their work is threefold, and it affects me more than anyone, and I will speak for you without compensation, and together we will pathetically enumerate, in homage to the great red dragon, and thanks to our partners in nutrition management, and take this blood-stained broadsheet, and do I smell bacon? For the sun makes everything crystal clear. For covetousness is all. Thank you.